Hey guys, welcome back to another Top 5 Rundown. So summer 2016 is now over, and man, what a crazy summer it was for movies. You had a lot of blockbusters that we expected to kick ass that kind of let us down, and we had a lot of little movies that we didn't expect much for that ended up coming out on top. So I'm going to go over my top 5 movies for summer 2016 and my bottom 5 movies for summer 2016. So I'm going to probably do a little bit quicker than I normally go when I'm describing these movies, since I have 10 to go over in this episode. I still want to try to keep it under 20 minutes. So we'll start off with my bottom 5. So these are what I consider to be the worst movies of this past summer 2016. Now keep in mind when I go over this list, a lot of the really, really bad movies this summer I didn't even bother seeing. You know, I didn't see the Independence Day Resurgence. I didn't see Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates. A lot of those movies I know ahead of time are going to be really bad and I don't bother with them. So just keep in mind when I go over this list, if it seems like there are movies that have been worse this summer, there probably were. These are just the worst that I have seen. So starting off at number 5 is XMen Apocalypse. Now, XMen Apocalypse I enjoyed for the most part, but it was a big disappointment for what it had built up to be. You know, X-Men Apocalypse was going to be the second movie that Bryan Singer is now returning to do in this newly rebooted timeline. You know, it was going to be reintroducing a lot of the original X-Men, you know, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Nightcrawler. It was introducing arguably the biggest villain in the X-Men universe. They were trying to tie up all the loose ends as far as the old, you know, the original cast of the X-Men movies being with Hugh Jackman. So they had a pretty tall order to fill with this movie. And they succeeded on some fronts, but they failed on quite a few. You know, I think the best part of the movie was Magneto. And James McAvoy always does really good too, but in this movie especially, Magneto's story is really what grips you along. You know, the whole storyline with his wife and his daughter and, you know, what happens as far as that. I'm not going to go into spoilers. Everything with Magneto up until like the last third of the movie is really the best part of the movie. And what's easily the second best part of the movie is, to me, these new cast of X-Men. Now, some people didn't care for them quite as much as they did the original, like James Marsden and Famke Janssen. I actually liked them quite a bit. You know, Ty Sheridan, I thought he did really good as Scott Summers. You know, I really liked Sophie Turner's version of Jean Grey. I think this is the Jean Grey that we've been waiting to see and that we should have gotten in X-Men The Last Stand had Bryan Singer not left to do that horrible Superman movie. So I really like the direction they went with her. I really like Nightcrawler. You know, Cody Smith-McPhee, he did really good with that. I even liked the small scene that Hugh Jackman was in, even though I feel like one of the main weaknesses in the movie was that Hugh Jackman wasn't in as much. You know, Hugh Jackman, for the most part, in all the original X-Men movies, and even X-Men Days of Future Past, is really the big driving force of the movies. Some people argue that he shouldn't be, but he is. You know, he's the best part about these movies for the most part. So you could really feel his absence in X-Men Apocalypse. But the main letdown really was just the villain Apocalypse and the whole third act kind of really falling apart as it went together. You know, X-Men, the Apocalypse, to me, whenever he first started out, he was really cool. I liked his, you know, backstory in the opening scene. I liked, for the most part, when he was getting all these, the 4 horsemen together, you know, especially the scene where he's putting all the armor on Archangel, you know, having the 4 horsemen by Metallica playing in the background was awesome. But really, whenever it started getting down to him actually enacting his plan, he lost a lot of his presence and he lost a lot of his kind of mythology, and even Magneto to a degree. You know, everything that he had built up in that movie of being this awesome character and the kind of the emotional gripping part of the story, the last third of the movie he was just kind of floating around with, you know, little magnetic filaments going all around him, just kind of doing this. And then even at the end of the movie, even though eventually they have to get there, yes, but him and Charles kind of just mending their ways and becoming friends again out of nowhere after everything that Eric has done was kind of jarring to me. And, you know, it could have been a lot better. I enjoyed X-Men Apocalypse, but it should have been and could have been a lot better. So X-Men Apocalypse is my number 5. Number 4 is Sausage Party. Now, Sausage Party was a movie that I had really not heard a whole lot of until the summertime was already rolling. You know, whenever that first trailer dropped, I think it dropped sometime in like June. Before that, I had heard little bits about it. You know, Seth Rogen's doing an animated movie called Sausage Party, and just by the name alone, I was like, oh God, what is this going to be? And that first trailer just knocked me on my ass. I could not believe how funny that setup looked. You know, the whole thing about the food not realizing that they were going to be eaten and they thought they were gods, and all of a sudden that woman starts ripping apart that potato. That shit just laid me on the floor. I was laughing so hard. And when I got in the theater, it wasn't quite as funny as I was expecting it to be. You know, like I said in my review, the first 15 minutes and the last 20 to 25 minutes were really, really funny. Everything in the middle was just, I was just sitting in the theater waiting, like, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. Because they really hung a lot of the humor on how funny you thought it was going to be to see animated food cussing. And they cuss so much. I mean, cussing's funny to a degree if you use it correctly, but they cuss so much that it just ran that whole gimmick into the ground within the first 15 minutes, and that's when it ceased to be funny. So everything in the middle of the movie was just kind of dull. And until you got to the end, whenever the food was taking its revenge on the humans and that big scene that everybody's been talking about at the end, whenever that stuff hit, you know, my laughs started to come back, and I laughed some of the hardest that I've laughed in 2016. But for the whole 90-minute package, I was pretty let down. So number 4 is Sausage Party. Number 3 is Paul Feig's Ghostbusters. Now, when I went into this movie, I wasn't expecting a whole lot. You know, even before the movie had came out and I had started to see the reviews of how kind of somewhat positive but mostly mediocre a lot of the reviews were, I wasn't expecting a whole lot. I was a big fan of the Ghostbusters when I grew up. It wasn't like a property that I was, you know, insanely protective over, but I did grow up with it and I did love the first movie. I'm not a big fan of Paul Feig's movies to begin with. I didn't think that Bridesmaids was all it was cracked up to be. I didn't really think that The Heat was all that great. I got a few laughs out of Spy, but they were mostly from Jason Statham just kind of playing a caricature of what he usually plays. So Spy, I walked away with a few laughs, but I was not expecting much from this. You know, the cast, I like Melissa McCarthy, but I feel like she does a lot of the same things in every movie she's in, so she really, her little shtick has kind of run dry for me. And all the others, you know, the Saturday Night Live crew, I didn't know anything about. Kristen Wiig is funny here and there. I wasn't expecting much from this, and even though there were some things that they did right. I mean, by no means Ghostbusters is not a horrible movie, but again, like XMen Apocalypse is not as good as it could have been, and it's damn sure not as good as it should have been. With the comedic talent that they had in that movie should have been a lot funnier, and it felt like they just spent a whole movie just paying fan service to the original. You know, they made this huge uproar online before this movie came out where people were being called sexist and, you know, pigs and misogynists and all this kind of stuff because they were, you know, and some people probably were, but for the most part people were just upset that they were remaking Ghostbusters, and everybody was kind of getting attacked, like if you didn't give this movie a positive review you were a sexist. So they had this whole controversy surrounding it before it even came out about they're going to make their own movie, and, you know, don't just leave your own Ghostbusters at home and come see our Ghostbusters. But then they spend the whole movie just talking about the old, you know, 1980s Ghostbusters. There's a cameo and a joke and a little nod like every 15 fucking minutes in that movie. And it got to the point where it was annoying. I think all the cameos by the original cast were horrible, especially Bill Murray's. If you're going to have Bill Murray in a cameo, at least give him a damn joke. Nothing more I can really say about Ghostbusters. You know, a lot of you probably already heard my audio review. Me and Holly did an audio review. She walked away really liking it. I walked away very unimpressed by it, and I don't think they're going to be making a sequel. If they do, they really need to correct the ship with that one. Otherwise, they're just going to get trashed again. So number 3 is Ghostbusters. Number 2 is Mechanic Resurrection. Now, this is a movie that I literally just reviewed this past weekend. I was a huge fan of the first Mechanic. You know, I give Jason Statham a lot more credit than he probably deserves. A lot of his movies are just kind of B-action movies, but for whatever reason, they work for me. You know, I mean, there's some that are better than others, but for the most part, I enjoy seeing Jason Statham kick the shit out of people. I don't really care about the setup. You know, whatever reason you have to get him to be in the path of these guys that he needs to beat the shit out of, whatever, just get the movie going. And for the most part, I'm usually entertained, but Mechanic Resurrection was just so bad. You know, they basically wiped clean all of what the Mechanic was, about him being this really smart, calculating guy and being 10 steps ahead of everybody and going out of his way to avoid situations where he can get stuck in doing things that he doesn't want to do. And he just throws all that out the window for Jessica Alba, who he's known for like half a day in this movie. And just, you know, even with that going on, I was thinking, okay, well, if they can at least deliver on some really good action scenes and some kick-ass fighting, I might be able to forgive it. But then they didn't even do that. You know, they didn't really have anything that I haven't seen before. They didn't have anything that I haven't seen before in a Jason Statham movie. So, I mean, it was a lot of the grittiness of the first Mechanic got washed clean for a lot of the crazy, over-the-top, ridiculous, suspend disbelief stunts of the Transporter series. It was so out of left field. Like the first stunt of the movie, he's on top of like a ski lift and he just jumps off and floats down and lands on top of a hang glider and escapes. And as soon as you see that, you're like, oh shit, it's one of those movies. So I was really disappointed by Mechanic Resurrection, and that's my number 2. Now, my number 1, a lot of people probably aren't going to agree with. And by no means, I'll be honest, this movie is probably not as bad as some of the ones that I have lower on my list, but this movie is by far the most disappointing experience I had all summer. Jason Bourne. I am a huge fan of the Jason Bourne trilogy. I even like the Bourne Legacy with Jeremy Renner. I think that movie was really good. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but I enjoyed it when I watched it. So whenever I heard that Paul Greengrass and Matt Damon were finally coming back for another Bourne movie, I was so excited. The first trailer had me so freaking pumped. That ending scene of that trailer where he just walks up to that dude and just knocks him out in one punch, that told me everything I needed to know about this movie. I said, all right, Bourne is back, bitches. No, he's not. And what really pisses me off is that Matt Damon and Paul Greengrass made such a big deal in interviews and press about, even from the end of Bourne Ultimatum, about how they are not returning to this franchise. They're not even going to consider coming back to Bourne unless they have a story that they feel absolutely needs to be told and is worthy of bringing this character back. And what we got is the total opposite of that. I have no idea what the hell they thought they were doing with that movie. I could not believe all the positive and most somewhat positive reviews I was reading on that movie, because I walked out just pissed. I thought the story was an absolute retread of everything we've already seen in all the other 3 Bourne movies and done way better in those movies. The villain was ridiculous. Alicia Vikander, who is an Oscar winner, her performance was horrible. She had no emotion whatsoever. Even Matt Damon looked like he was asleep half the movie. The action scenes were horribly directed. The shaky cam was like this the whole time, which I know is in a lot of the Bourne movies, but not nearly as bad as this one. I couldn't even tell what the hell was going on half the time. I didn't know who was punching who until they hit the ground. The chase scenes were just as bad. Just everything about this movie was bad to me. I did not walk out with one positive thing. Even the scene in the trailer that I just told you about, where he walks up to the guy in the street fight and just knocks him out in one punch. Yeah, that scene's in the movie, but they cut it from a different angle and it loses all of its impact. It's from like behind Jason Bourne's head, and when I saw it, I was like, why the hell did they change that? It was so much better in the trailer. So, yes, Jason Bourne's probably not as bad as Mechanic Resurrection, but I could at least get some stupid fun out of Mechanic Resurrection, and I got to watch Jessica Alba for 90 minutes. Jason Bourne just left me walking away with a headache. I was nauseous. I didn't want to even come back to a Jason Bourne movie ever. That's how bad that movie was to me. I was done with the franchise. So number 1, absolutely for me, was Jason Bourne. Well, that does it for my worst movies of summer 2016, guys. So now let's move on to the positive side. Starting off at number 5 with my top 5 movies of summer 2016. Surprisingly, Bad Moms. I expected absolutely nothing from this movie. My girlfriend Holly wanted to go see it. It looked kind of funny in the trailer, so I was like, okay, this isn't going to be a horrible experience. I'll take you to go see it. And I laughed my ass off this whole movie. I was shocked at how smartly funny this movie was. You got Mila Kunis and Kathryn Hahn and Kristen Bell playing the 3 main girls, and basically they give up all their mom responsibilities just to let loose and be fun and just kind of enjoy their life and not be like the stickler PTA mom who has to run around and, do all the things that moms have to do. And just being a parent, the humor in this movie really hit me. And it might not hit you as well if you don't have kids of your own, but just some of the jokes in here about what parents go through just absolutely just laid me on the floor. It was so damn funny. I was laughing from start to finish. There wasn't really any lull in the movie like a lot of comedies nowadays where they kind of burn through all their good jokes in the first 40 minutes and then you're just kind of in sleep mode until the last third of the movie. This movie had me laughing start to finish. Kathryn Hahn gave an absolute breakout performance. I really want to see some more of her just let loose like she is in this movie. Christina Applegate did a great job playing the villain in it. Just nothing bad I can say about that movie. There was a little bit too much male bashing to me. It's supposed to be a movie for moms to get away, so I understand they have to throw in some jokes there about dads being worthless, but to me, being a dad, it was kind of a little bit too much for me. It was a little bit too much. So that was the only negative I really walked away with Bad Moms. Other than that, that was an absolute blast. That was probably my favorite comedy. Second favorite comedy of this summer. So Bad Moms was great. Whenever it comes out, you guys check it out. Number 5 is Bad Moms. Number 4, which is not going to be on a lot of people's list, is Suicide Squad. I know Suicide Squad wasn't perfect. I know a lot of people were let down by it, but Suicide Squad was an absolute blast to me. I walked in with not really low expectations, but I just walked in just wanting to be entertained, and I was entertained. There was, yes, some story problems in the third act. Yes, they could have had a better setup for these characters. Yes, Joker and Harley should have been in their own movie with Batman before this. Yes, the villain was horrible. But I had a blast in this movie, you know what I mean? Will Smith as Deadshot was really, really good in this. It's the best movie he's been in a long time. Margot Robbie actually absolutely killed it as Harley Quinn. I really liked Jared Leto's take on the Joker. It was different. It was something unique. He made it his own. I wasn't expecting him to come out and beat Heath Ledger's Joker because I don't think anybody will, but he did something his own, and I really liked it. Jai Courtney, for the love of God, he was good in the movie, which I never thought I'd ever say. He was hilarious. Jay Hernandez's character of El Diablo was great. He was one of those characters that you absolutely expected nothing from because not a lot of people recognize him, and he ended up being a lot of people's favorite movie character in the movie. And Joel Kinnaman, I got to mention him because not a lot of people give Joel Kinnaman credit, and he's great. I loved him ever since I saw him on The Killing. I thought he did good in RoboCop, even though RoboCop a lot of people shit on. I thought he did good in that. I hope he gets a lot more to do because that guy's a really, really good actor who's really underappreciated. Everybody did really good in that movie. I did see that they had kind of catered the story towards Will Smith. That was one of the main negatives that I walked away with. It wasn't something that absolutely destroyed the movie, but it was noticeable to me. I could tell that they cut away Jared Leto's Joker and Harley Quinn's relationship to make room for more Deadshot in the movie. But just the action scenes are really good. I love the back and forth with the team. Just seeing those comic book characters come to life on the screen, especially Harley Quinn. We've never seen her on the screen before, and she was played so well. Seeing Batman kind of sprinkled in here and there, and the one scene with the Flash, which really kind of ties into this whole extended universe thing that they're trying to do now. I thought that was done really well. Just Suicide Squad to me was an absolute fun experience. It was like Deadpool. Is Deadpool the greatest movie on earth? No, it's a very simple story. It's a goofball comedy, but it was a fucking blast to watch, and that's how I felt about Suicide Squad. So Suicide Squad is my number 4. Number 3 is Captain America Civil War. Now, aside from Deadpool, this is the best comic book movie we've had this year. It's not perfect, but it's an absolute awesome action movie. I love Captain America Winter Soldier. That's probably my favorite of the Marvel Studios movies. And Captain America Civil War was a phenomenal follow-up to that story. I was worried that they were going to make this Avengers 3 and it was just going to have, Captain America's name stamped on it, but he was kind of going to get lost in the mix. They kept this a Steve Rogers focused movie, which is really, really hard to do with all the characters that are in this. Iron Man, Tony Stark playing kind of a side role worked really well. Him and Captain America have a really great back and forth. You believe their own motivations for doing this, and you really don't know who to root for at certain points. You believe in Captain America's stance, but you also believe in Iron Man's stance at a lot of times. So there's a great back and forth, they're kind of switching your moral compass a little bit. The introduction to Tom Holland's Spider-Man was phenomenal. I was worried that was going to seem really shoehorned in, and to a degree, they probably could have done without it for story-wise, but I thought it was a great introduction to what we're going to get from Spider-Man. He had some of the best scenes in the movie. I loved Black Panther. That was an awesome introduction to that character. Winter Soldier was great, the way that they continued off of his story from the second movie. A lot of people gave shit to the villain. I actually liked the villain a lot. I thought it was something really different from Marvel movies. He was just kind of this guy in the background manipulating things. He wasn't like this mustache twirling villain or this big superhero guy that has powers that's coming to beat him up. He was doing everything from the background. And even though there was some convenience to how things kind of played out in the end and how his plan was able to just kind of come together at the end so magically, yes, I can understand some of that, but I really liked the different take on the villain. He's not necessarily the Baron Zemo from the comics, but I liked the different take on the villain. I liked that it was a different kind of villain for a superhero movie. So Captain America Civil War, to me, it's a long movie. I thought that as far as negatives, It dragged a little bit in spots because it's a very long movie. And, you know, there's some times in the movie where I feel like the stakes aren't quite as high as they should have been for the Civil War concept. You know, the stakes in the comic book are very, very high. Everybody's involved. There's death, there's drama, and we didn't quite get a lot of that in this movie. You know, not to spoil the movie for anybody, I'm not going to get into who dies, who doesn't die, but for as huge of a conflict as it was made out to be, I feel like it kind of wrapped up with a nice little bow to a degree. So that was the only like small negatives with that movie. But that movie was an absolute blast to see. Like I said, next to Deadpool, that was the best comic book movie I've seen this year. And we'll have to see with Doctor Strange. It might end up being the second best comic book movie all year. But Captain America Civil War was an awesome movie. It's coming out on Blu-ray here in a week or so. So if you guys haven't seen it, check it out. That's my number 3. Number 2 was a movie that really came out of nowhere, and it's probably the most criminally unseen movie this year, The Nice Guys. This is a Shane Black movie. It stars Ryan Gosling. It stars Russell Crowe. It's kind of a throwback to like 70s movies where, I mean, it's a Shane Black movie. If you know Shane Black's movies, you know what to expect. He directed Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. He directed Iron Man 3. He's written a lot of movies that a lot of you guys probably love. The First Lethal Weapon. He directed Long Kiss Goodnight. He's been writing forever, but he's only directed a handful of movies. I love all of his movies. I'm a Shane Black fanatic. His humor really, really works for me. Even Iron Man 3, who a lot of people hate, I loved Iron Man 3. It's probably my favorite of the Iron Mans, you know, don't shoot me. But I loved The Nice Guys. The Nice Guys was hilarious. It's basically Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe trying to solve this murder, basically, or this missing persons case where all this murder is tied into it, and just the places that they go and the back and forth between Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling is just pure Shane Black writing. It's hilarious. You're engaged with the story the whole time. It takes a few twists and turns here and there, but it's just a fun movie to watch, and nobody went to see it. It sucks that nobody went to see it, because this is one of those things where, you know, I did a little episode talking about this, where people are clamoring saying we don't get enough original ideas, we only get sequels, we only get remakes, we only get reboots, but nobody goes to see the original movies that we do get. You know, The Nice Guys was a total classic original movie, and nobody went to go see it. And it's a phenomenal movie. So number 2 is The Nice Guys. It's on Blu-ray right now. It's probably on demand to some degree. You probably have to pay for it. I'd rather just go buy the Blu-ray if it was me. But go check out The Nice Guys, guys. If you like comedies, if you like funny movies that's got a little bit of grit to it, if you just like enjoying yourself, The Nice Guys is as good as it's going to get right now. That movie is an absolute blast. Go check it out. That's my number 2. Number 1, best movie of summer 2016. Might be a little bit redundant talking about it since I just talked about it this past weekend. Don't Breathe. This movie surprised the shit out of me. I had heard little rumblings of it before the summertime, but I never expected it to be on my list, let alone top of the list. This movie was great. This was the best horror movie that came out this year. You know, I love The Conjuring. I liked Lights Out a lot, but this movie tops both of those in spades. This movie was phenomenal start to finish. Stephen Lang plays an awesome character as the blind man. Fede Alvarez just cements himself into being one of the best horror directors out there today. I cannot wait to see what that guy does next. The cinematography was phenomenal in that movie, which is something that you do not expect in a horror movie. The acting was really good, like I've already kind of said. The setup was really, really simple, but it was executed perfectly. It was claustrophobic. You were right there, and like they say in the title, Don't Breathe, you were so into that movie and on the edge of your seat when you're watching it. There's times where you find yourself not breathing, like the guy's going to come through the screen and get you. I mean, that movie was that engrossing. I love horror movies, but it's really hard being a horror fan with the shit that we get nowadays. Horror movies are so hard to stay dedicated to and to defend sometimes, because kind of the shtick of horror movies is that they're allowed to be bad but still be good, which for me kind of gets old. You know, I like movies like this where they actually go for quality and they want to give you something that you're going to remember, or you're going to tell people about, you're going to rave about, and you're going to want to have it on your shelf and to show people for the rest of your lives. When they talk about, I haven't seen Don't Breathe yet. What? You haven't seen Don't Breathe? And they take it out, put it in. Those are the horror movies that I miss. You know, nowadays we get movies where it's just the same old shit. It's the shaky cam, found footage movies. It's the possession movies. You get a slasher, you get a remake here and there. very, very few and far between do you get movies like this that come out of nowhere and just surprise the hell out of you and just cement themselves into some of your favorite horror movies of all time. So, like I said in my review, not only is Don't Breathe one of the best horror movies we've had in years, not only is it the best horror movie we've had in 2016, it's the best movie of summer 2016. Don't Breathe is my number one. If you haven't seen it, go out and see it. It's in theaters right now. Get it on a matinee. I don't care how you go see it, but go see Don't Breathe. It's an absolute awesome experience in the theater. Well, that's my top 5 and my bottom 5 of summer 2016, guys. Comment below with your top 5 and your bottom 5. Very strange summer that a lot of our big blockbusters kind of let us down, and kind of these smaller movies rose to the top, but it's actually kind of cool to me. I like seeing the little guy win every once in a while. So, like I said, comment below with your list. Please like and subscribe, share this video, and I will be back next week with another top 5 rundown.